Right, finally. Welcome to our extraordinary meeting of Council, which I have summoned to consider urgent business for the submission of the Council's response to the Government's English devolution white paper. Before we begin, I was going to say a few words about the last Council meeting, but I think I'll forego that as everybody's waited long enough, and we'll get into the substantive of what we need to say. Apologies. Are there any apologies? Any apologies at all elsewhere? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? None? Thank you. Item 3. Interim proposals for local government reorganisation. Now we move to our only item of business, which is a report from the Leader of the Council and Chief Executive in respect of the local government reorganisation. In December, the Government published its English devolution white paper, which set out a series of measures intended to transform how public services are delivered at a local and regional level across England. At our January meeting, this Council was tasked the Leader and Chief Executive with entering into negotiations with neighbouring authorities to determine the most appropriate form of local government for Derby and Derbyshire. I understand that since several rounds of negotiations have taken place and we meet this evening to consider an interim proposal pending development of a full business case for submission to the Government by November 2025. I will shortly ask the Leader of the Council to move the recommendation in this report. I'm sure Councillor People will take the opportunity to explain the outcome of those negotiations in more detail. The recommendations are subject to the normal rules of debate and require a simple majority to be approved. Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Local government reorganisation is happening across England. 317 authorities are required to submit outline proposals by the 21st of March 2025. In January, Full Council mandated myself and Chief Executive to work with the districts and boroughs across Derbyshire to look at the data and to collaborate to find consensus on options for our proposal that fits the criteria set by government in their letter sent by the Minister for Local Government, Jim McMahon, in February 2025. At that meeting, an amendment at the time was put forward by the Reform Group that suggested we support a north-south option, but in the spirit of collaboration, it was withdrawn so that we could keep our options open and look more into the data before making a final outline proposal. So, as you asked us to do, the Chief Executive and I did exactly that. We attended an initial workshop hosted by KPMG, who presented us with 14 options and the opportunity to look at other suggestions we may have had. Paul Simpson shared those options with you, I believe, on Wednesday to help you to understand how we arrived at the conclusions. The two options in the report this evening are those that best fit the criteria presented to us. That criteria of population size, economic equity, geographical sense, and community identity. And those are the options that are present this evening. As agreed in the January Full Council meeting, the Chief Executive and I have kept group leaders informed along the way, and the briefing arranged on Wednesday was, I hope, helpful to you all. Having arrived at those two options and found consensus across the 8 districts, boroughs and our unitary, we attended a further workshop last week to finalise the outline proposal. Now, the reason for submitting these two options at this time is based on a recognition that Amber Valley, sitting in the middle of the county, could go either north or south, so it was felt important to consult with Amber Valley residents, institutions such as the NHS, police, fire, businesses and other partners to understand where they relate most to and how both options would affect the organisations and the residents there. That is, the next stage of the process is for us all to do that across the county. And I have to say that, on these two options, right here, right now, personally, I'm not wedded to them. I'm fairly relaxed at this point. I think that more detail is definitely needed. Analysis is absolutely required. And after the initial submission, we will have more time to do that. We don't know what matters may arise in the coming months that we've just not had the time right now to consider. And for that reason, I believe we should keep our options open and as wide as possible. So while these two proposed options are the two that all districts and boroughs and us as the City Council have agreed on, it could be possible to put more suggestions on the table at this stage if this council felt the wish to do so. As an authority with no overall control, I feel that this is the most inclusive and collaborative invitation that I can make at this time. So if any councillor or party wishes to do so, and I do apologise for suggesting this, but I would suggest a short adjournment to discuss any options to see if an amendment is required, if an additional option is required. What I wouldn't recommend is to support any proposal that donuts the city. The proposal put forward by the County Council does not meet the government criteria in that it isn't proportionate in population size. It would cause us, as the second unitary in the county, to remain in a financially precarious position, unable to raise more council tax or to take advantage of the combining authorities to make the required savings. And it would strangle the city's opportunity for growth. And those current challenges we have of meeting our housing targets would not be resolved. We would continue to rely on the surrounding authority to help us meet those targets. The housing would continue to be built on our boundaries. It would continue to put pressure on our infrastructure and our services, while we would not be able to relieve those pressures with council tax raised from those surrounding houses. The leader of the County Council is presenting his proposal as a single unitary proposal, completely failing to acknowledge that we would be the second unitary authority, isolated, but still stuck in a big brother situation where we are treated not as an equal, but as a poor relation. Now, this is another reason why we absolutely should present an initial proposal at this time. To not do so would only strengthen the County Council's proposal and would damage any opportunity of influencing or negotiating a final proposal. We need skin in the game because this is happening either with us or to us. It's clear that local government reorganisation is going to happen. And there are many factors that we don't have control over right now, such as councillor numbers, and I know that that is of concern to many members. But we can make representations about that at a later date if we have skin in the game. The numbers quoted in this report, that's not part of our proposal, it's not part of the joint proposal, it's just an indication of a midway point. It could be higher, it could be lower. But for now, it is vital that we stay engaged in the process while we move to the next stage of deeper analysis, consultation, and an understanding of how this will affect us here in Derby. As a final point, Mr. Mayor, I will draw everyone's attention to 6.1, other options, and I'll read it out loud. Not to approve the submission of the interim proposal is another option. However, it's not recommended, given the position set out in the letter from the Secretary of State attached. The letter confirms that in circumstances where a joint proposal cannot be agreed, this will not be a barrier to progress, and the government will consider any suitable proposals submitted by any of the relevant local authorities. So this gets done whether we are on board or not, and if we're on board, at least we get to be part of the decision-making and the influence. Agreement and submission of the interim proposal will maximise the Council's ability to influence the future of local government in Derby and Derbyshire as the final business case is further developed. Mr Mayor, I'll leave it there for now to allow time for the debate. We have waited long enough for that, and any potential adjournment that may have to happen. And if it's appropriate, I'm happy to respond to any questions if you would allow that, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you a seconder? Reserve your right.
Speakers?
Any other speakers? Councillor Cuss? Thank you. Can you circulate the amendment, please? Do you have a seconder, Councillor Cuss?
We've got a copy.
Yeah.
There's some more coming round.
I've already got mine. It's fine.
Shall I proceed?
Councillor Cuss, please present your amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've been analysing the data along with tonight's proposal. The data I have used to find out the figures for each ward numbers of electorate's projection has come from the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. From their review they did in Derby 2022 and in Derbyshire 2024. The population projections for Derby were until 2027, which is in line with the next local elections in Derby. Therefore, I have used these figures to cross-reference the data with the Derbyshire projections. As alluded to yesterday's briefing, the proposal is based on using the current ward boundaries of both the city and county to proceed with this proposal. The proposal document currently bases councillors' numbers on a figure that would mean Derby City wards would have 2 councillors in each ward, bar the ones in Chaddeston. This will cause an imbalance that will need addressing. Some of these imbalances are substantial, such as Chaddeston East, Chaddeston North and Chaddeston West, that are projected to have around about 30% more than the average voters to councillor ratio than any other ward. To put this into perspective, wards need to be within 10% to have a good electorate equality as defined by the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. It is also worth noting that there could be more imbalances across the other councils that need addressing too. I believe it is reasonable to presume that a boundary review will be needed with these proposals presented tonight. We are aware that we had a boundary review not long ago. However, we need to address certain imbalances and ensure our plan is good enough for the government to accept it. I believe that we should embrace a boundary review to ensure that communities are grouped in a way that reflects their local identity, such as the areas around the outer city wards that are cut off by the city's borders. These areas could have the opportunity to be included in the ward that they identify with. Also, with the boundary review, we can ensure that all areas get its fair share of councillors to ensure that fairness in democracy and people's opinions.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, can we have quiet while the councillor speaks, please? Thank you.
I just said that last bit again. Also, with the boundary review, we can ensure that all areas get its fair share of councillors to ensure fairness in democracy and people's opinions are evenly weighted. Thank you.
Councillor Prosser, do you want to speak now or reserve your right? Are there any other speakers on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's a reasonable request to put in such an addition. I mean, to bring in the boundary review obviously means that we can't influence what the outcome of that boundary review would be. But equally, we can put this forward, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But, you know, as long as you're aware of that, it's not something that we can influence, but we can certainly, you know, suggest it. So I have no objections to this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Graves.
Well, it's pleasing to hear that Councillor Pearfield and the Labour Group are very happy or comfortable with this amendment, because this amendment is actually quite important at these early stages. What it actually says to people is that we have the right number of residents represented by the right number of councillors. And at the moment, with the ward boundaries outside of the city, the number of residents being represented is less per councillor than it is in the city. Now, what that means for the city, and we should all be here for the city, is that we would have less councillors representing the whole of the area. So the reason that this is put in is not to be controversial, it's actually to protect the city going forward. So I quite agree with Councillor Peatfield, there is no reason why we shouldn't all support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Matt Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick one. Just to correct you, unless I'm wrong, Leader, that my experience of boundary review was very positive in terms of the engagement. Many meetings were held. We submitted together collectively as a ward councillor cohort in Micklehove proposals and comments. So actually, I do believe that there is quite a lot of engagement that we can actually be part of if that process was carried out again. That's just a point.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
I do want to speak. Just very briefly, I am disappointed at how light the proposal is on some of this information, because it's very important that we do get it right. And that's why we put this in today, because there is no mention that this is perhaps even needed and it can just be pushed through. It will not be pushed through very easily. This will be a very painful process and we need to make sure we get it right. So that's why this is, we want this in. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the vote. All in favour? Thank you. The amendment is moved. Thank you very much.
Pardon?
Surely the amendments carried, not moved.
So if we now move back to the amendment, the substantive motion as amended, and I think Councillor Kerr has indicated.
Okay, well, we've heard that. We've moved back to the substantive motion now. It's been amended. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was pleased to read this document after so much sort of talk about it and not seeing it. It feels to me like a document that's been written by consultants on behalf of officers. And I think that's really sad, because I would have liked it to have felt like it was there from the councillors of all the various councils working together to put something that was actually going to be for the voters and for the residents in this area. It does the job, but it's just the flavour of it. For example, devolution should be moving stuff downwards. Devolution here is referring to our relationship with the mayor. But our relationship with the mayor is because there was devolution from Westminster to the East Midlands. And our devolution in that sentence may be from the councils down to the people. That is devolution. And it's not what seems to be written into here. The other thing that worries me is that we talk about the stronger community engagement and neighbourhood empowerment, and we've got words wrapped around that, but actually nothing that seems to be in action. For areas outside the city, we've got parish and town councils in most of the areas, not all of them, and they provide an opportunity for devolution downwards because they are elected bodies to which services can be devolved. We don't have them in the city, and I think that we should have the opportunity to do that, because with the suggested number of councillors, it is going to be really, really difficult. When we became a unitary, we survived with 44 councillors for the first few years, and 44 was desperately short. And the idea of 65 to cover 2 additional districts as well as the city seems, again, desperately short. But if there is a role for another democratically elected layer of people in community councils within the city, districts and, parishes and town councils outside, it would not be totally impossible. And there are things that could be then taken as decisions more locally than they could be in a giant unitary. Decisions should be taken, in my view, as close to where people live as possible. That is the devolution, which is the government's view, that we should be trying to achieve. And that, I think, is how we achieve it within the guidance that's come about the local government reorganisation, which talks up the role of town and parish councils, because we don't want to have an uneven playing field and less democracy within the city than they have in the districts. I therefore have an amendment which would introduce strengthen the role of the having community councils and opening that up as a vision for a wider unitary.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Can you circulate the amendment, please? Have you a seconder, Councillor Kerr?
Second, it reserve my right to speak, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, has everybody got a copy of the amendment?
Yeah. That's right. Okay.
Councillor Kerr?
I've said the bulk of what I wanted to say, and hopefully that it's fairly self-evident the importance of democracy, of working with our electorate rather than for them, though for them is something we also do. And if we are going to empower them, then this is a way to give that greater empowerment. I would just like to mention also that I think that some of these suggestions would have come forward as part of wider discussion if all councillors had been involved in the discussions, more involved in the discussions that we've had up to this point. And therefore, under stage 2, develop detailed case for change, I would hope that the engagement with politicians would be able to include all councillors rather than just council leaders and portfolio holders, because I think we might then have not had such a delay to the start of this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hassel?
Anyone wish to speak on this?
Anybody wish to speak on this amendment? Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for a sensible amendment, which we're happy to support.
Seconder?
Any other speakers? Seconder, would you like to speak?
Just move it to the vote, Mr Mayor.
Okay, amendment to the vote then, please. All those in favour?
Against?
Any against?
Any against? Turn to the substantive motion. Councillor Hassel has indicated.
Right, return to the substantive motion. Councillor Hassel, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are here to discuss a report that will shape the future of our local government in Derbyshire. This is a momentous decision, one that will have lasting consequences for the residents we serve. However, I must express my deep concern regarding the nature of this report and the manner in which this decision has been pushed forward. First and foremost, the timescale for this decision is wholly inadequate. The proposal was only recently presented to us, yet we are expected to approve a plan that will fundamentally restructure local government with only a matter of days to consider it. There's been little opportunity for thorough scrutiny, detailed discussion, or meaningful engagement with those who will be impacted directly. The gravity of this decision demands due diligence and extensive consultation, not rush timelines that leave elected representatives and the public sidelined. Why are we being asked to make such a significant decision with undue haste? Secondly, the report is strikingly deficient in its exploration of alternative options. We're told that 15 models were initially considered, yet we were only presented with 2 final options with a little insight as to why they were dismissed. Where is the full analysis? Where is the comparative assessment that justifies the selection of these 2 options over the others? The Council and the public deserve transparency in decision-making, particularly on a matter of such importance. We must demand to see the full range of possibilities and the rationale behind the recommendations made. This leads me to my third concern. This entire process appears to be a fait accompli. The manner in which this proposal has been presented suggests that the decision has already been made behind closed doors, leaving little room for meaningful debate and amendment. Consultation with residents and stakeholders is mentioned, yet it is framed as a formality rather than a genuine exercise in participatory democracy. If we are serious about representing our communities, then we must ensure that we have a genuine say in this decision, not just a post hoc opportunity to comment on something already predetermined. Beyond these process concerns, the report itself is rife with shortcomings. The potential risks we are being asked to approve a fundamental restructuring of our local government without clear guarantees of financial stability. The report acknowledges significant budget gaps and financial pressures, but offers no substantive mitigation strategies. The risks associated with service disruptions, particularly in social care, are acknowledged, but not adequately addressed. For these reasons, I urge the Council not to be railroaded into a rushed and ill-considered decision. We must demand more time, greater transparency, and a genuine commitment to exploring all options. Our duty is to our residents, not to an imposed or predetermined outcome. Let us stand firm to our commitment to responsible governance and insist on a process that is thorough, transparent, and truly democratic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patterson.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment.
Can we circulate the amendment, please? Councillor Matt Holmes, thank you. Has everybody got an amendment? If so, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this amendment is a simple one, but the right one. To give us all more time to consider the options for local government reorganisation in Derbyshire. It has become clearer and clearer over the last few days and weeks that there remains more questions than answers regarding the possible options for reorganisation. When notice was put out for this meeting last Wednesday, the covering papers included repeated reference to Appendix 2. Appendix 2 being the analysis that KPMG put together for the Council. However, as councillors, no Appendix 2 was shared with us. We were told it would not be ready, but we would receive it on Friday. Friday came and went, and still councillors in this chamber had not received sight of the KPMG report. Our own Democratic Services officers also confirmed they had not had sight of the papers. Whilst we waited for the papers, the leader of the council, along with other leaders across Derbyshire, put out a press release saying a model for LGR had been agreed. To put this out, whilst all other elected members had no detail on what they were talking about, was simply wrong and epitomised how rushed this whole process has been. When the papers finally arrived on Saturday, we were presented with two options. None of us were given sight of any of the 15 options, all the 15 options KPMG had put together. So how can we stand here tonight and make an informed decision for our residents without sight of all 15 options that have been produced? It is our duty to consider them in as much detail as the other two that were presented here tonight. With a day's notice this week, councillors were invited to a last-minute briefing session ahead of tonight's meeting. The organisation of this briefing session was as rushed as this whole process has been, and the lack of notice was simply unacceptable. I know I was not the only councillor who had commitments, which meant I could not attend this session. But I want to be clear what this amendment is doing. This is not about rejecting the options presented for us tonight. LGR is going to happen in some form or another, we all know that. But our ability to look at all of KPMG's options in any detail have been completely hindered. What we need to do is take a step back and take a breath. This is a huge decision impacting on the future landscape of Derbyshire's local government for decades to come. It is not one to be rushed, and it is our duty and our responsibility as elected members to ensure everything has been fully considered before we can make the best decision for our residents. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to ask Emily to respond to some items in that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just going to make one point to full council, and it may be that at some point Mr Mayor or the leader may ask the Chief Executive to make a comment. I note that the amendment suggests that we hold a future extraordinary meeting. Obviously, that has to be called properly. So if we wish to call a future extraordinary ahead of the deadline to submit the proposal next Friday, the summons would need to be issued this evening. However, an alternative which would allow more flexibility would be to adjourn this meeting, and that would allow the meeting to come back at any point this week. I just wanted to make that option available to you as a suggestion that would allow a debate prior. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I want to speak in support of motion, but also just challenge what's been said. The point's simple. If we actually refer to the letter from the Minister of State, the Minister of State, who I'm assuming knows what he's talking about, here gives us the option to spend more time, to be more thoughtful, to actually consult our communities. And I'll read what the Minister of State actually says. We ask, so he's not telling us, he's asking. We ask for an interim report to be submitted on or before the 21st of March, in line with the guidance set out in the attached appendix. So my experience of letters from Minister of State is when they ask, they're giving you the option to do it. And they give all the reasons in the letter why we should be taking our time to consider this. And it's all the things that have been mentioned. So then if you go to appendix where it actually gives the clarity on this, it talks about interim plans, and you can read this yourself. So it says an interim plan should be provided to the government on or before the 21st of March 2025. Now, if the Ministry of State wanted us to submit a time and felt that was important, what he would have said, or what civil servants would have put in that letter to say, is that you should provide a letter. Yeah, and not, sorry, that you must provide a letter, not that you should. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, so, and my experience, again, as letters from Ministers of State, if they want to be explicit, they will say there'll be directive. This isn't a letter that's just come out, it's been well thought through, and the actual terminology used is very, very thoughtful. So the Ministry of State's not asking us to actually lay all our cards on the table now, and I support the comment. I mean, I was actually at the briefing yesterday. It was the first time I'd seen that. I certainly feel I'm qualified to be providing informed judgment to this council, let alone constituents that might ask a question, because I've only had sight of it yesterday. And there's absolutely no imperative there. There's no suggestion that if we don't submit a report by 21st of March, that we're going to be any way disadvantaged. All it says that you must submit your final report by November. So I ask you, council, for the benefit for all our sakes in the future, but more important for residents of Derby, that we actually do take time to think about what we're actually proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Could I, first of all, before I speak on this, so just hold my time a minute. I just wanted to ask Emily if you could comment on the part of the amendment which says to delay approval proposal for Derby and Derbyshire, because my understanding is that we can take our name off the submission, but we can't influence the districts and boroughs to delay their submission. So this doesn't seem to stand.
I have carefully considered the wording of the amendment, and whilst I think it is tricky, I think as worded, the recommendations are our recommendations as an organisation, as a city council. They are the interim proposal is a proposal which concerns other councils, but the actual recommendations are our own. So a reference to delaying approval of local is a reference to this council's delaying approval of local government reorganisation is my interpretation of it, and I do believe that on that basis it can move forward. However, I am concerned that whilst the wording exactly does not negate the motion as drafted, the effect of it does have the impact of potentially meaning we do not submit our proposal by the 21st. I understand the arguments made by the Conservative group on that point, and again, we're coming down to very narrow interpretation of individual words in a letter.
As suggested, could I also invite the Chief Executive to comment, please, Mr. Mayor?
Paul, I'm just going to have to give a brief summary on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to address the meeting. Obviously, we've had some conversations with the Conservative group. There is a deadline. My experience as a, for want of a better phrase, a senior civil servant is that when the government asks us to submit by a date, that is probably the best thing for us to do. So my advice to you as members would be that it would be It wouldn't be sensible for us to suggest another deadline because I'm guessing the vast majority of local councils that are being required to submit proposals will do just that. They will hit the deadline. As the leader has intimated, I suspect that the other Derbyshire district and boroughs and certainly the county council will submit their proposal by the 21st of March, which would leave Derby left on its own, if you like, in terms of having not submitted our proposal. The other thing I would say in relation to the amendment and some of the detail, of course, is that the prior full council meeting delegated the responsibility to negotiate with the other district and borough councils to the leader and myself, and to bring back a set of proposals to this meeting prior to submission by the 21st. That is exactly what we have done. So we have fulfilled, Mr Mayor, as far as I'm concerned, as the Chief Executive and on behalf of the leader, the requirements of full council to discuss with our neighbours a set of proposals and to bring back a preferred option to full council. That is what the initial case for change is. And of course, and I know there's some concerns about this, the initial case for change is just that. And the Secretary of State today has just come out and said it's a barometer, a state of the nation, if you like, in terms of how authorities are progressing with their plans for local government reorganisation. It is non-binding. And it's also important to stress that the decision about local government reorganisation will be taken by ministers. They will determine which option goes forward for further consultation and further development. It won't be our decision, that will be a decision taken by the Secretary of State. And I'm happy to respond to any other questions that may come forward, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, point of order on that point, CP64, I believe. There's a slight ambiguity in the statement from the Chief Exec and from the leader that I'd just like a bit of clarity on. Are we saying then that all 7 other councils involved in this, those proposing the proposed to the north, those going proposed to the south and Amber Valley, will all be holding meetings like this to put forward this proposal? So 7 proposals submitting this are going to go forward to the government anyway, irregardless of whether we take more time to discuss what options are actually right for the city.
Just to clarify for the benefit of the chamber, a point of order is, that wasn't a point of order, Councillor Eyre. A point of order, just to be absolutely clear, may only relate to an alleged breach of the rules of the Constitution. That was actually a question for the Chief Executive. The Chief Executive has indicated that he will answer questions, as has the leader on this occasion, but that is entirely at the Mayor's discretion. On this occasion, I would suggest that we don't count that as your speech, but I'd just like to remind the chamber what a point of order is.
Yes, I do believe, obviously subject to the agreement of their respective councils, that the district councils will be submitting the initial case for change collectively, because that's what the government have also required us to do, is to collaborate on proposals for local government reorganisation. And again, that is a key criteria to demonstrate that you have collaborated. And there may be some inference, and I say it in complete and utter openness and transparency, an inference that if we don't submit along with our district and borough colleagues, that may suggest we don't agree with them. That could be an inference that the government may take from our non-submission of a proposal that we were originally working with them on.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Peterfield.
Thank you. If I may now, unless there are any other questions. Nope. No, that's fine.
Councillor Peterfield, if you continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the timescale from the white paper to this March deadline is a short one. But that is the nature of this, the way that this government wishes to move things along at pace. It's not of our making in this chamber, and we have done exactly as you asked us to do in January, and as the Chief Executive explained, we've moved that decision along collaboratively. This is not Councillor Hassel used the word predetermined several times. There's nothing predetermined about this. This was a decision made by leaders that we came to after being presented with various different options. The majority of those options were not feasible. Now, if you're suggesting that those options should have come to every single councillor in every single council across Derbyshire, we'd be debating this for weeks on end and we'd never get anywhere. It was delegated and we did that job. What we've done is bring you the end proposals that we arrived at in a very, very sensible fashion based on the criteria. There was no politics being played in this at all. Now, the consultation with all of our partners, with all of our residents, that comes at this next stage. This next stage will be really, really important one. That's when we get, as I said in my initial introduction, that's when we get to really take more time and look into the detail. And if more if these two options that we're putting forward as an interim proposal actually end up not being the correct ones, we have the opportunity and the time to be able to say, actually, no, we've got a better idea now and we can see, we can look deeper into the data and we can see that there are better options available to us. So, as the Chief Executive said, this is not binding, it's not predetermined, it is a moment of direction in this time. The stake is in the ground on the 21st. We can't move that. So if you vote for this amendment, what you're basically voting for is to take our negotiating power off the table. None of that, as I said, none of it is set in stone. We can't delay the district and boroughs' submissions. They've found that place of agreement. They have, they don't have the challenges we have in this this arena, and that's not. That's for them, and I understand that everybody in here wants to be heard, and that's why I gave the option to actually, discuss this evening if there were any other proposals we wanted to put into our interim proposal at this moment in time, because the more options are on the table, the more that we can discuss at the next stage. Councillor Patterson, you said it yourself. LGR is going to happen, but as I said, it's going to happen with us or to us. And I don't want it to happen to us. I don't want to be told what Derby's doing. I wanted to be a part of that negotiation. You asked us to bring the best options before we presented it, and that's what we've done this evening.
Thank you. Just before we take other speakers, Paul, would you just like to make a comment on?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I just thought it would be worth reminding councillors that the workshop that the leader has just alluded to, where we explored the options, took place on Thursday, the 13th of February, and that took place at Amber Valley District Council headquarters. And then, so did I. And then on Tuesday, the 18th of February, myself and the leader gave a briefing to all the group leaders about all of the options that had been considered and why they had been. So, I'm simply saying that there was an interim opportunity there where the information had been shared on the options that we had discussed, and that was shared with group leaders on the 18th of February.
Thank you, Paul. I've got Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's be constructive about this. The concerns by councillors in terms of what information we have, what detail we have, we can all share. We've voted on 2 amendments which were supporting the original recommendations, and the amendments were accepted unanimously by the Chamber. Now, I do get the concerns about having more time to sort of understand more options, but that doesn't disappear for us. We can be sensible about this. There's a proposal with the 2 amendments. going forward. And if it requires another additionality, saying, which I think it does exist, the leader mentioned that is the opportunity to bring forward more, when we have more information and more consultation, more suggestions about, or another proposal which might be more sort of acceptable to us and for the people that we represent in the city. So we can move forward, make a decision today, which is the two proposals which the chief executive and the leader, with the other chief executives and the leaders, looked at through a consultancy, KPMG, of all the options. They looked at the criteria and applied them, and with the best will in the world, proposed the two that had the greatest consensus and met the criteria the best. Now, we could, after this meeting, if there was not the opportunity, despite the leaders being shared the other options, there was not any chance to have debate on that, we could look at those. We got ample time to do that. Before we get to a position where sort of final submissions, I think something like the chief executive leader could inform us, I think in November or something like that is time when actually any firm decisions have got to be made. So there's plenty of time for raising concerns, gathering more information, raising questions, getting clarifications, and saying, okay, based on that, the proposals we put forward as the interim with the amendments are not the ones we're considering. Here's something more suitable and substantial. Surely, I mean, that's a sensible way to go forward, not sort of undermining the process and not stopping us being part of the sort of the debate and the contribution, but at the same time, having time to do exactly what Councillor Patterson and Councillor Wright shared with us about the concerns about having more information, more debate, more discussion about what potentially could be other options that could be put forward. Surely that's a sensible thing that we could do at this stage and move this along and then continue to look for information to see and get feedback from our constituents about what we can do, what we can't do, and what's the information that we glean from that, which actually gives us more ammunition to say, no, let's consider a different option which could work. That, to me, seems a sensible way to move it forward today, rather than take ourselves out of the game. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard Chief Exec's answer to the previous question, and it said that ministers will decide on this whole thing. So if ministers are going to decide, then what is actually the point of us sending the proposals? And because all the authorities would be sending the different proposals. And what I get, like, or the leader of the council, she said, it's not predetermined, but it's quite likely with the time frame. So there's so much pressing on the time frame, 21st March. It does feel like that this may get pushed on us, and whatever we are saying or discussing today, it won't matter at all. And also another important thing is the views of the constituents. I don't think many of our constituents know about this whole reorganizing thing. They don't know about this, and we are rushing to the time frame. Then how are we going to get the views from our constituents? How do they feel about this? I know some self-survey, you go and speak to your residents, you will get the real picture. Just go and showing me a picture is not going to help. So, or if you want, you can go, you put a social media post and you'll get the answer, Councillor Rapton. Stop showing me the picture. So this is exactly my point. I would like to have, can you please stop showing me that picture? I would really appreciate that. I would love to get some more clarity on how ministers are going to make a decision on this, because Chief Exec did mention that ministers will make a decision. So what criteria are they looking at to make a decision about this whole process? Thank you.
Councillor Pandy, with the assistance of Emily, we've just drawn the report up, and item 4.5, the criteria, might answer your question. Councillor Hassel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment is not a criticism of the leadership of this council. Let's be very clear of that. I understand the sort of unnecessary restrictions that have been placed on the leader, the chief exec, and all the officers who have brought this report to us. Absolutely, fundamentally. What this amendment is about, it's about defending the rights of each and every one of you in this chamber. This, I can say it again, this is a fundamental decision. Fundamental. Changing historic boundaries and makeup of the city. The changes that are contained within this, fast forward 5 years, our groups will not look like this. And that's for good or for bad, but that's the reality. There'll be some of us in this chamber, some of us not in this chamber. There's a lot at stake. But what this is about, it is not a criticism. Please reiterate the point, it's not a criticism of what has been presented. It's a criticism of the process. We as elected members are here to represent all those people out there, okay? And we're here for them. They put us here, and we have to do the right thing by them. The government, in my view, is wrong in its timetable of trying to decide this decision. Wrong. You might say, so what? But someone has to say something. We can't, it would have been so easy to come here at 8 o'clock this evening, wave it all through, let's all go to the pub. No, it can't be like that. You've all got a responsibility to decide this with the full body of evidence that sits behind it. The report that we've been offered, while it suffers from positive bias, yeah? It doesn't offer us any rationale what else was considered and why it was dismissed. We should demand that information. No. With respect, I didn't talk over you. The chief executive refers to a meeting of leaders that was given this information. It was a group leaders meeting where approximately 10 or 15 minutes was referred to it. But, yes, it was offered, but was it offered to all of you? No. This amendment's about you, it's not about me. This is about giving you the tools to decide this properly. It's not about, let's decide it because the clock says so. Okay? This is, please be aware of the decision you're making here and why you're making it. And can you go home tonight and sleep soundly knowing that you've deliberated and gone through all the detail? How many times have each of you read this report? I've read it 7 times. 7. And it doesn't give me what I need to know. And if it doesn't give me what I need to know, it can't possibly give what you need to know. I'm not trying to negate the process. It's been very easy to come in here and vote against. Could have done that. Trying to help all of you to make the decision in the right way. This is about you. This is your amendment in one sense. You might say we're trying to be awkward, trying to be difficult. I'm not. I'm standing up for the process here. And you're right to decide this in the right way, not in a rushed way. So please, give us all some time, give yourself some time, and give your residents the actual, you can go with them hand on heart that you've made this decision, fully loaded with all the information, and not just waving it through because the clock's running out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I
I would also like to see what I presume to be some sort of spreadsheet that KPMG put together about options 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and the other ones we didn't talk about. And against that, some sort of assessment as to what was good and what was bad. Now, I presume they've done that. Somebody has assessed it, and the conclusion is what we had circulated to us, link, on Saturday. I can understand that people would like to see the data behind that. There are people in this chamber who have that sort of analytical background and who like to be able to see the detail and not just be assured that somebody else has looked at it. However, I also recognise the importance of having a decision that can get to the relevant Secretary of State in a timely manner. And I therefore ask whether the mover of the amendment would accept a change to the motion to say, rather than a further extraordinary meeting of the Council, but to pick up the Monitoring Officer's recommendation that we actually adjourn the meeting tonight and we can provide the data to any members of the Council who wish to look at it and reconvene at a date to be decided next week before the 21st, so that we can have that time to consider, we can have informal time for discussion, and we can still make the deadline for the Secretary of State. So that's my question to the mover of the amendment, to give us all time to consider any further information that we have from KPMG, any further information that the Chief Executive or others wish to give us, that we can consider it and be comfortable with it before we make a final decision. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepared to give a 10-minute adjournment if people want to discuss that. Thank you. Seconder.
Back in here at 10 o'clock. Thank you, councillors, and thank you once again for your patience. The meeting will now adjourn at the point we were at, with Councillor Kerr had asked Councillor Patterson a question. Mr Mayor, with your permission, were you comfortable for Councillor Patterson to answer that question? And then we'll move back to Councillor Kerr's substantive speech. I think she had about a minute left.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I'll turn down Councillor Kerr's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kerr.
Oh, I'm really sad about that, but I'm going to sit down again.
Councillor Prosser, I have you as Councillor Khan.
Oh, sorry. Councillor.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, people had indicated to speak on Councillor Patterson's amendment, and so we're going through the list of names we had in order. So Councillor Kerr had spoken. The next person who had indicated was Councillor Prosser, followed by Councillor Khan, Councillor Onwaha, and then if there was any other people who indicate to speak, it would be to the seconder. Thank you.
Councillor
He didn't say he was
Onwaha, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to come back to what the leader of the Conservative group had stated earlier about the group leaders, or about all councillors perhaps not being aware of the result of the consultations that had been delegated to the leader and the chief executive. Now, we had done that, and I just want to confirm that as a Labour group, Councillor Pitfield did come back to us to let us know about the deliberations that had happened. Now, I just want to confirm from the chief executive if he had also made sure that leaders of other groups were made aware of the decisions before they were brought to this chamber. With your permission, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, well, I think I said that earlier, Mr Mayor, through you, that we had given an overview of the information that we'd reviewed with the district and borough councils in terms of the 16 options, and give an indication of the 2 preferred options that it was looking likely that we were going to bring forward, which are the 2 options that are in the report there before you this evening, Mr Mayor.
Okay. I'll now go to Councillor Prosser.
Thank you very much. I just need a minute to gather my thoughts before I stood up and spoke. That was why I refused it a few seconds ago. So realistically, I wanted to say there is precedent for force and things being forced through this chamber, and then no opportunity later on to sort things out. That happened very much over MCA. I don't believe this is necessarily that situation, but there is therefore mistrust and concern within councillors that should this go through tonight, or should something go through tonight and we've missed something, that actually we will not have the appropriate time to revisit what we need to visit. I also think it's very important to note that a lot of the trouble that's happened tonight appears to be from a complete lack of information in the report. The report, for instance, it would have been nice to have an appendix on how certain decisions were made, where the information is, detailed figures, charts, spreadsheets, anything. It is actually really lacking in detail, and that, I think, has really hurt people within this chamber, is not having any information to base this figure on, or not enough information to base this figure on, but a couple of headline figures, a couple of pretty charts, and not enough actual detail. So that's been really hurtful to people in this chamber and hurtful to tonight's process. I do think it's important to hit the deadline. I do think it's important to be involved. But I'm also extremely concerned about missing the information and missing the things that we really need to get right. So it would have been prudent to include an appendix with that information. Unfortunately, it's not there. And I think that's really been painful tonight. So hopefully we can get it better next time.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no other speakers, I'm going to the seconder of the motion, which is Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Government's rushing this. I know it. I think you know it. And whilst they won't say, I think officers know that they're rushing it as well.
Hang on, Matt. You've been interrupted again, Matt.
Councillor Holmes, please continue.
Okay, sorry. Government's rushing it. I know it, you know it, and I'm sure, although officers won't be able to say, I think they know that government's rushing it as well. It's going to be a long process, and they've imposed an unrealistic initial time frame. The pressure that officers and KPMG have been put under as a result has not been helpful, and I think voting for the substantive would lock us into two options, and we need to be honest about that. And what about our residents? What do they think? We're elected to represent them, but can any of us actually say that any meaningful conversations have taken place in regards to tonight's motion? For example, the Mickleover residents I've spoken to bring up city boundary expansion. It's a small sample currently, but personally I think that could be a viable option. Yeah, difficult, challenging, yes, but myself and my ward colleagues want to represent our community's views on this or other options, to understand it and to be able to represent them when the time comes. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, details lacking, and I think everyone can agree on that as well. Residents and businesses of Derby do deserve better. They deserve more respect. They must have a voice in whatever time frame we can force on something that will define how their local area will be governed from where and by who for decades to come. The amendment attempts to address that. Thank you.
Councillor Peterfield, do you want to respond to the amendment?
Thank you. I don't even know if I'm allowed to speak on this one, to be honest. I'm absolutely befuddled with all of the shenanigans tonight.
You are entitled to speak, can't speak for you haven't already spoken on this.
Thank you. I mean, everybody's talking tonight about not enough detail, not enough time, but we've heard very clearly this evening that, you know, the leaders of the groups have had updates, bi-weekly updates since the first meeting in January. We have been really open with the group leaders, and you know, and they've had the information. Now, if they had chosen to discuss this in their groups, as I did, that's my job, you know, is to cascade that information down to my group, to debate it, and to make sure that my group is in agreement, and that we're all going along, you know, the right track. Then, you know, that falls on you to do that too. And you could have come at any point, you know, having seen how open we have been about this, you could have requested that information, more, you know, detail at any point, you know, over a month ago, but you haven't done that. So anybody in this chamber that doesn't have that information and hasn't had it does need to look to their group leader and ask why. No.
64, whatever it is.
It's a point of personal explanation, I think you're looking for, Councillor Potter.
We haven't been party to any particular information. We saw one slide on a screen, and Nadine has had a very privileged position being in negotiations with other councillors that we have not been privy to. So we have not, unfortunately, had any information to share with the group, and we were hoping that there was going to be more in the report.
So, I'll continue. What we've now got, though, is just this dither and delay as a result. I mean, delegation happens, and everyone in this room gave that delegation, you know, you chose to do that. That happens so that this doesn't happen, so that you don't have decision-making by committee and meetings till midnight. I mean, almost, you know, congratulations, Lucy, you've got your committee system, one way or another. We've offered you, we've been reasonable this evening, very reasonable. You know, I've said that I was relaxed, that, you know, we could talk about further submissions. You've had the option to defer the meeting so that we don't have to go through this pain, but you've given an unreasonable response to that. And you've also had the option to all be briefed and receive all that extra info that you're asking for, that extra detail, and to delegate that to your group leaders so that we remove the pain of having to come back here and do all this again. and for you to be able to have the opportunity to propose as many more options as you wish to. I think that's reasonable, but your response yet again has been unreasonable. You know, for all of your talk about how grave this is, you know, we're not meeting the deadline and therefore we are missing out on our influence here. You know, when the government comes to us on the 22nd of March and says, where is your submission? And we say, well, we haven't got it yet. We're still talking about it. You know, that's 316 other councils who got their act together. And, you know, and you've made the decision tonight to not do that. So I'm really, really disappointed that we couldn't find a more reasonable conclusion to this meeting tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, so we move to the vote on Councillor Patterson's amendment. Thank you, everybody. The motion is therefore amended. Does anybody now wish to speak on the substantive? Move to that. Well, move to the vote.
Move to the vote of the motion is amended.
We're moving to the vote on the substantive. All those in favour?
Of the motion is amended. Can I just check, because all councillors clear where we're at in the debate, there looks to be some confusion. Yeah, so I'm just to clarify, so everyone's clear, Councillor Patterson proposed an amendment to the motion. That motion has been voted for, so the motion is now amended as it's been amended by the amendments of Councillor Cuss, Councillor Kerr and Councillor Patterson. We now move back to the debate on the substantive motion as amended. So that is what the Mayor has just asked for.
All those in favour?
Same again, 25. Mr. Mayor?
I'll vote for it.
Mr. Mayor, 25. For, against? 24. The motion is amended.
So the motion as amended is passed.
Councillors, could I ask you to remain seated while the Mayor makes his closing remarks? Thank you.
So that concludes both our business this evening and my time chairing these meetings. I'd like to thank everybody for your patience and kindness as you've negotiated the last 12 months together. Notwithstanding what I said at the start of the meeting, I've mostly found them enjoyable and experienced. So I look forward to seeing you at the annual general meeting on Wednesday, the 21st of May. Thank you.